Here we have a question from Joe. He wants help. He's trying to upload a video, and he wants to do some editing, but it's taking a long time to load, and also when he does try to edit it, it's very glitchy. So let's see if we can give him some help. All right, let's see if we can decipher what's happening for Joe. Unfortunately, all he's showing us is the thumbnail in his resource panel, which is where we have him right over here before we drag him down to the timeline. I assume that he's already dragged this down to the timeline, and something is happening on the timeline. So we don't know what exactly what this means. The loading cycle never actually loads. So I don't know if he's talking about what's happening here or what's happening down on the timeline here. I would venture to say he's probably talking about when he drags this down here, it never loads. And so what he's talking about, and I have a 2 gigabit byte file here. I assume that this 8-minute video that he has here, 8 minutes 48 seconds, I have a similar 9 minutes 25 seconds, is probably some sort of high resolution media. It does look like it's coming off of his iPhone because it's got this IMG image 1044 designation or file type. So that's probably what it is. It's probably in the HEIC format, which is a high compression format. But we don't really know. We're just speculating on that. But I'm speculating that he has a high resolution format. And what he's talking about here, that the this loading cycle never actually loads. So he's talking about when he's dragging it down here, and what we get, and I'm just going to go ahead and keep my project settings, we can see here that some of it has loaded, but some of it hasn't loaded. And as long as I keep moving the mouse, it should stop it from loading. But you can see here that it is indeed starting to load. And what this part of it is, it's rendering on the timeline. And he says this never completes. There's probably a reason why it never completes, and I will get into that in a second. But the other thing that's happening that we can tell from his little clip here is this ring right here. This ring says that it's trying to create a proxy file, and he's dragging it down before this proxy file is created. And that's okay, he can do that. He just has to sit around and wait a little bit longer. And you can tell how slowly mine is going because this is a gargantuan file. In fact, I'm going to take it off before it renders because I want to go through the steps that you can either use or you can disable, whichever you choose. So let's go ahead and just delete this from the timeline here, and it's gone. Okay. There are 2 things Filmora does to help you make a smooth editing process. The one, of course, is the rendering on the timeline. In this case, this is a file. We put it down here, and it's now going to render as it goes along. After about 5 seconds, I'll show you where that setting is made. But basically, you can see that it's slowly rendering. And so when you pull it down and you have it on the timeline, it's called a lazy load as long as the line is red. And when it starts turning green, that's when it's becoming rendered. And once it's fully rendered, editing is going to become smoother. But how can you make this rendering occur faster than it is now? All right, I took it off again. So let's just review the settings that we can set up. We go to File, we go to Preferences, we go to Performance, and we go down here to Preview Render. And you have this Preview Render here. If it's turned off, it's never going to render. It's never going to start rendering. So that may be a reason why it didn't start rendering for him in the first place, because he said it never rendered. Once it renders, editing becomes simpler because the critical stuff is then stored into memory. And you'd notice that mine, I had mine turned on, start rendering after 5 seconds. This is adjustable. You can set the time frame more or less. But rather than putting the raw video down there, what you should be doing is you should be using proxy files. Proxy files are simply a lower resolution file that's used during editing. It is not what is used for your final render when you go to export the file. It's only what's used when you're here in editing. And so in very few circumstances do you need it fully rendered in order for you to do that, do anything with it on the timeline. For example, if you're going to take a snapshot of something on the timeline, yeah, you want the best quality. You want the raw footage down there. You want it fully rendered before you snap that shot. Otherwise, that snapshot is going to be taking of a lesser quality video. Now, if I change this, the default setting, by the way, is 1920 by 1080. If you drag a video down to the timeline that is of a higher quality than this, it will create a proxy file. And the proxy file is what gets put on the timeline. And remember, for editing purposes, all you need is the lowest quality where you got a clear enough picture to do your editing. You don't need the crispest picture unless you have a very, very powerful computer. So let's see what could have happened to Joe's video had he gone through the rendering process. I'm going to re-import this video onto here. We have now set the proxy file value to 1920 by 1080, which is HD or 2K. I've now turned it on, and now we shall see that little circle appear here. Okay, we can see that it's starting, and this is pretty much like what Joe has here. He has a little bit of that blue there. Now, if he had just sat still for a while, he would have gotten this file fully rendered. And once it was rendered, a copy of his raw data would have been made in a lower resolution file, which would have been easier to handle for his computer to handle when he's editing, and he wouldn't have the glitching. But there's another setting in preferences. While this thing is rendering, let's just go back and let's take a look at the media cache section. And up here is the proxy file settings. If you're working with very dense files, such as Joe, you may want to, well, you're going to want to use the proxy files. But there's two ways that you can clear these proxy files out so they don't clutter up your machine. You can automatically delete them, proxy files, when you close the project. If you are using these proxy files and you're working on a project over multiple days, I would not recommend you doing this. As you can see, we're still rendering up here. It's going to take a while before this loop finally completes rendering. Instead, I would keep it turned off. And then once I finish the project, I would go in and clear. Because if you clear it out every time you shut down the project for the day, the next time you open up, all of these video clips that you have in your project are going to have to re-render. So you would want to leave this turned off and only go in here at the end of the project when you've backed up all your raw data, whatever you're going to do with it, and you're satisfied with your final video. Then go ahead and hit the clear button and get rid of it. Now we'll see that when this is done, we will have a value here of a proxy file. So let's just cancel this for the time being, and I'm going to pause the playback, or I'm going to speed up the playback here on the timeline so that we'll come back when this circle is completed. Okay, we have now fully rendered this file. We now have a proxy file that we can use. Let's just go into the preferences again, and let's go to media cache. And we can see that we have created a new file that is 643 megabytes. And keep in mind, the original file was over 2 gigabytes in size. We now have a smaller file that's going to occupy less memory. We're going to not have this turned on, so when we shut off the project and we open it again, this proxy file is automatically going to exist. When we're done, we can go ahead and hit the clear button. Okay, let's remember that I had set my rendering to render after 5 seconds. We don't know what Joe's setting was, whether he had it turned on at all or whether he simply had it turned off. If he had it turned off, it would never render. And if it didn't render, that's going to give him that glitchy effect that he's complaining about. If he did have it turned on, but it didn't fully render down here, that would also give him that glitchy effect. We recall that mine took a certain length of time to render, and now we'll see how much time it takes for this to render once we put it down here. We put it down here, and then we're going to wait 5 seconds after I drop it, and it's going to start rendering up here. There, it's starting to render. It's going faster, but not as fast as it's going faster than it was before, but it's still taking a little bit of time. It's still a sizable file. It is 9 minutes long. So I'm just going to stop talking here while it renders. I'm going to bring in the task manager, and we're going to go to performance. Depending on the type of, while it's rendering here, we can see that it's rendering here, but I'm just going to cover this up. We'll keep the other side open. We can see that that the GPU is running at 100%, or so rather the CPU is running at 100% trying to render. And more importantly, the GPU is almost also running at 100%. Now, a lot of the work is being done down here and making this go faster. That normally would be up here if you do not have a ray tracing GPU. That's your video card. I happen to have 24 gigabytes of memory dedicated on the video card or the GPU. And in addition to that, I have 64 gigabytes of memory installed on the motherboard, of which 31 gigabytes can be used by the GPU in addition to its own 24. So for a total of 55 gigabytes. However, you'll see the utilization is going very high, 80, 84%. And if it went to 100%, I wouldn't be totally surprised. And the reason for that is not all of the GPU is the same type of memory. Only a small portion of it is dedicated to ray tracing. And that's when you're doing 3D encoding, when you're doing video decoding. And you can see this is where this 75, 80% is coming from. It's coming from this part of the processing. Believe me, if you don't have a GPU that has ray tracing, it's going to go extremely slow. So that's one of the things we'll talk about next, what you can reduce the amount of time that you need to spend here. I'm just going to drag this off to the side. We don't need to look at it, but just in case we want to bring it back in. Okay, we can see that we're moving along nicely here for our online rendering here. Now this may be something, I haven't actually studied this. If we close out the project and we open it up again, it may have to re-render in memory because this is what's happening live in memory. But it's not using as much of the GPU now, so most of the work must have been done. We can see that we are we're using 60%, so 40%. So we're using way less than we were before of the GPU. The CPU is still running like gangbusters, 100%, and it's a, let's just click on that. I think my base speed here, the base speed of my CPU is 3.2 gigahertz, but it can overclock up to 5 gigahertz, I believe. So it can go a little bit faster than what it is right now. But for the time being, we're using a lot here. And stuff is being loaded into memory, which is where it's then accessible for processing. That's what's happening with the GPU and the CPU at this point in time. There is some activity occurring. It's writing some stuff back to the hard drive, or reading from the hard drive maybe. But that's not as important. The thing that's important is the GPU and to some extent the CPU. And so this may be what's hanging Joe up. He can start his task manager and then click on the performance tab to see what's happening. But we can see that we're just about done rendering down here. And once we reach this point, this will become editable. And there we go. We are now fully rendered. And I believe we're going to see our GPU usage drop down a little bit here. Yeah, we can see that it's dropping. Part of me moving the mouse around and doing some other things is also contributing to it. And particularly now, we also see that the CPU is dropping down and it's getting freed up. So we had 100% utilization. Now we're down to 9%. So the rendering is done. Okay, enough beating on that. What could we do to make this process even faster than this? So we know we have a big file up here, but are we going to use everything? Is Joe going to use all 8 minutes in there? If not, it would behoove him to not import the whole thing, but rather just import a little bit. Let's delete it from here. And let's delete it from here. And let's go in and clear out our proxy file, because that didn't get cleared out. We got 6 files that were generated through this process. We're going to hit clear, and they're all gone. Okay, how can we make the process faster? Well, if we know that we're not going to use all of it, don't just do an import like this. Instead, go down and import with the Instant Cutter tool. Okay, we know that it was clip number 98, 2 gigabytes. Let's go ahead and open that in the Instant Cutter tool. Okay, we know that this is 2 gigabytes of data, and maybe we're only going to use a small portion of the clip. We're not going to use the whole thing. Let's say, for example, we want to use that part of the clip right there. That looks pretty cool. We're going to now shorten that down, and we're going to go to, okay, get around the turn. Good. We're going to use just that portion of the clip. So rather than having 9 minutes worth of media, we're not going to have 1 minute and 45 seconds. So we can do that. But maybe there's more than this that we want to use in this clip. Maybe there's a second segment. So we're going to click Add Segment, and we're going to go further on down and see, is there some other cool stuff that we want to use? Okay, yeah, it doesn't really matter. There really isn't, but let's just pretend that we want to take this section right here, and we want to go a little bit up like that, and we want to use that. So the point of this is we only want to use 2 segments, maybe we want to use more, but we can choose as many as we want. Now we will go ahead and export that. And when we export it, we can say where we want to put it in or whatever. And let's say we want to set, we can choose to do nothing, which means it's just going to make 2 little lossless files of the same quality as the original. Or we can say, just open the output folder. But we're going to leave it at send to Filmora. That means it's going to make 2 small files of the same quality as the original, no loss in quality whatsoever. And they're going to be much smaller. They're going to be a total of, I don't know, we'll see what we get. But it's not going to be as much as the whole thing. This one here is, well, 302 megabytes. And we had 2 gigabytes. So we'll say send to Filmora. Okay, it has now processed both of them, and it's added both of these little ones to our file. And see what's happening now. It's making a proxy file for 98.1, and when that gets complete, then it will start a 98.2. And again, this is why you don't want to erase the proxy files every time you close the project if you're going to work on it for multiple days. We can see here the proxy files are being created, and the proxy files are uses the GPU. If this stuff was shoved up to the CPU, it would go really slow. Okay, we're done processing, and in the final analysis I will post the time that it took to process the longer 9-minute versus these 2. These can now be brought down. And let's just, okay, we got both of them selected. We're going to drag them down to the timeline. And we're going to go ahead and keep it here. And let's see how long this takes to render. Okay, there we have it. These 2 files have rendered. And in post-processing, I will put out the 2 times on there. But basically, this is rendered in HD. And this is a lot higher quality, probably even than you need for editing purposes. We can go to half or quarter quality, and the quality on the screen may be less. But the other thing we could do, okay, let's just leave this at full quality. If this is even better than you need for editing purposes, then in the performance section down here in proxy, you could have gone to a lesser size. You could 1280 by 720, and now the proxy file would have been way smaller. And keep in mind that when you go to export, you're not going to be using the proxy files. Whatever you do to the proxy files, it's going to be applied to the original files, and that's what's going to be included in your export file. So proxy files are just for editing purposes. So let's just recap what you should do. 1, you should import, when you have media like Joe has, you should import just the sections that you need via the Instant Cutter tool. Secondly, you should use proxy files so that as soon as they're imported, the proxy file is created. And then thirdly, make sure that you render on the timeline before you start editing. If you follow those 3 basic steps, you won't have any glitches or lagging while you're editing.